Let's imagine, just for tonight, that you are no longer a person with fingers or socks or deadlines. You're not a voice or a face or even a thought that's had too much coffee. Instead, you are something altogether quieter, simpler, and considerably smaller. You are a single water molecule. Yes, really. Two little hydrogen atoms clinging fondly to a single oxygen atom like sleepy toddlers holding on to their mum. That's you now. You are tiny, invisible to the eye, and most importantly, you are somewhere deep, deep in the ocean. Not near the surface, where sunlight pokes around and fish have opinions. No, you've sunk lower than that. Much lower. You are in the deep ocean. The real deep. The kind of deep where light doesn't even bother showing up. Where pressure builds like a moody teenager slamming doors. Where time has a slightly different flavor. Slower, heavier, slightly saltier, and absolutely perfect for sleeping. Here, in the abyssal plane, you drift not because you want to, but because drifting is simply what you do. There's no agenda, no hurry. You're not trying to accomplish anything noble or useful. You're just existing in a soup of slowness, surrounded by other equally indifferent molecules. Some of them have been down here for centuries. Others might be passing through on their way to nowhere in particular. In this story, we'll spend a very quiet day, though day is a generous term, wandering with you through this cold, still, softly humming world. You'll encounter pressure gradients, ancient marine snow, bizarre creatures with blinking lights, and currents that meander like lost thoughts. But nothing will really happen. And that's the point. This is a place where nothing needs to happen. So settle in, or rather, allow yourself to be gently suspended, as you already are. No swimming required, no control necessary. You're just here, floating in the cold, dense quiet of the deep sea. And your only job now is to drift, slowly, into sleep. You were once near the surface, you don't remember why, or for how long. Perhaps you were part of a gentle ripple, nudging a jellyfish. Perhaps you danced, briefly, in the sunlit froth of a wave that rolled against a quiet, unbothered coastline. Or maybe you were evaporated once, centuries ago, and flung through the sky before falling again, without ceremony, back into the sea. But none of that matters now. Now you are descending. Not plummeting, that would require energy, intent, or something resembling a plan. No, your descent is slower than that, less dramatic. It's the kind of movement that doesn't interrupt anything. A polite, inevitable sinking. You are becoming part of the deep. Above you, the sunlit world has long since faded into a vague memory, light filtered through layers of blue that deepen with every meter. The brightness dissolves like a thought you meant to remember but no longer need. Light becomes dim, then dusty, then forgets to arrive at all. You are surrounded now by water that no longer sparkles but simply is. Thick, steady, and astonishingly still. And you are not alone. Tiny specks of detritus drift beside you, fragments of long-forgotten organisms, bits of carbon, soft mineral flakes, and particles of marine snow. That's what they call the steady, gentle rain of biological material that sinks through the water column. Not snow in any romantic, fluffy sense, but a constant, sleepy drizzle of decay, peaceful, indifferent, and endlessly falling. You join it, naturally. The descent is not something you chose, nor something you resist, it simply continues, one slow meter at a time. The pressure increases, but you don't notice. Not really. You're a water molecule. You do just fine under pressure. Around you the blue grows deeper, darker, denser, shapes begin to vanish, motion becomes theoretical. The world narrows into a pure gradient of darkness and temperature, with nothing to disturb it but the occasional flick of a bioluminescent creature. A quiet flicker, brief and unbothered, before returning to stillness again. There is no ground in sight, no bottom, just deeper and deeper water, layered in shadows, quiet as stone. You continue drifting down, slowly enough that time forgets to measure it. And as you sink, the water thickens around you, folding you into its hush. The current is weak here, barely a whisper, but you feel its fingers now and then, brushing past like a thought not quite fully formed. You turn with it, slightly, though it doesn't really matter which way you face. Directions are for creatures with ambitions. You are a molecule now, you have none. You are still falling, though it's unclear whether falling is the right word. This feels more like settling, being placed gently into a forgotten drawer of the universe, padded with stillness and pressure and quiet. You don't resist it. You simply go down deeper and deeper still. There is no sound here. Not really. Not in the way that you, back when you were something more vertical perhaps, used to understand sound. Here in this descending column of water, pressure is the dominant presence. Sound, if it happens at all, is swallowed before it can stretch. A whale might sing far above, or perhaps very far below, but the notes arrive so softened, so delayed, they barely register. They become part of the texture, like a memory woven into fabric, something you feel more than hear. And still, you fall. The darkness is complete now, not dramatic or sinister, just thorough, like someone forgot to turn on the universe in this part of the sea. You are roughly 1,000 meters down now, maybe more, maybe less. You don't keep track. You are a water molecule. Clocks are not your concern. But here, in the midnight zone, also called the bathypeladic layer, for those who enjoy long Latin-flavored names, the pressure begins to introduce itself more personally. It doesn't shove, it doesn't crush, it simply surrounds. Imagine sitting beneath a mountain made entirely of water. Now imagine that mountain being incredibly polite about it. That's what this feels like. Over 100 times the atmospheric pressure you might remember from the surface, but perfectly distributed. No corners, no edges, no urgent squeezing. Just a soft, consistent hug from all sides. You are held by it, pressed into the ocean's slowest rituals. Around you life persists, but just barely. Here and there, something blinks. A fish with transparent skin. A squid with lights built into its body like sleepy street lamps. You pass each other without comment. You are too small to be noticed, and they are too slow to care. This world is not barren, just indifferent. There is no sunrise here. No coral reefs or schools of brightly colored fish darting about like they have somewhere to be. The only movement is drifting, settling, wandering with no urgency whatsoever, a kind of liquid suspension that continues without witness or applause. Sometimes, entire days pass in this layer without a single ripple. And still, you fall. Not because of gravity, necessarily, it's more of a gravitational suggestion. You're caught in the slow, inevitable current of sinking organic matter and mineral dust, a slow-motion confetti of the ocean's forgotten moments. You fall with them, through layers of water that grow colder with each passing 100 meters. Through gradients of salinity and temperature, all silently calculated by the ocean's invisible logic. No sunlight will reach you now, not ever again, not unless you rise. But there's no reason to rise, not yet, not in this part of your story. You have nowhere to be, nowhere better than this. You are here, entirely here. Suspended in the dark, compressed by the deep, held in place by nothing but time and physics. And you are doing exactly what you're meant to do. Drift. Eventually, though eventually has lost much of its meaning, You begin to sense something beneath you. Not with eyes, of course, not even with touch, but in that molecular passive way that you notice the change in your surroundings, simply by being part of them. You are slowing. The descent becomes less a fall, and more a final settling, the way a snowflake eventually comes to rest on the shoulder of a coat, or the way a sentence ends when there's nothing more to say. The abyssal plain is waiting. It is, by ocean standards, utterly enormous, a flat, featureless expanse stretching for miles beneath the deep sea, like the floor of a forgotten ballroom, untouched for centuries, carpeted with a slow-falling haze of ancient particles. Bits of carbon. Faint outlines of plankton that once dreamed of sunshine. Microscopic shells. Pieces of things that were once part of something, long ago, far above. It's all here now, waiting, slowly collecting, like dust on a book no one reads anymore. And you are nearly part of it. The pressure has reached its quiet maximum, more than 1,000 times what the surface experiences, but to you it is just home. There is no struggle, no panic, just an extraordinary stillness. You feel it like a blanket tucked tightly around every side of you. You're not being crushed, you're being held. Temperature here is almost an afterthought, just above freezing. Not cold in the human sense, because you are no longer something that cares about comfort. You're not warm or cold, you simply exist, in the exact condition the deep sea has prepared for you. And now, you touch the bottom. Not with a thud, or even a landing, it's more of a pause, a faint moment of contact, softer than silence. You join the loose sediment, the resting molecules, the layer of peaceful obscurity that covers the floor of the ocean like sleep. You're here. Still. Suspended in darkness so deep it's indistinguishable from time itself. Around you, tiny creatures scuttle slowly, their limbs adapted to the crushing quiet. Worms with no eyes. Bacteria that feed on the barest hint of chemical energy. Occasionally, something flickers, a faint glow from a distant drifting body, but it fades just as quickly, returning the world to its usual dim hum. You don't move. There's no need. Movement here is optional. You've reached the bottom, and it doesn't expect anything from you. You are free to rest. For a day, or a decade, or longer, if no current comes to carry you elsewhere. You have arrived in the least demanding part of the known world. You don't move, there's no need. Movement here is optional. You've reached the bottom, and it doesn't expect anything from you. You are free to rest. For a day, or a decade, or longer, if no current comes to carry you elsewhere. You have arrived in the least demanding part of the known world, an expanse so vast and unbothered it might as well be the universe's waiting room. No appointments, no announcements, just the slow, constant layering of time in particulate form. And now that you've touched down, you do what all the wisest molecules do. You stop. Not dramatically, not forever, just long enough to forget what it felt like to fall. You let the weight of the ocean cradle you. You let the silence do all the talking. And you become, for a little while, part of the deep. Perfectly still, perfectly quiet, and perfectly at rest. You have arrived. You are no longer falling, no longer drifting. You have landed, if one can call it that, in the deepest stretch of the ocean's floor, a soft, shapeless layer of sediment, slowly accumulating over millions of years. Here, everything is fine. Not spectacular, not remarkable, just fine, which frankly, is all you could ever want at this depth. The abyssal plain does not reward speed, it does not recognize urgency, there are no rewards for productivity, no praise for being early. It is a world where presence alone is enough. Simply being here means you're doing your job perfectly. And so you remain. You are nestled among grains of silt, tiny shards of long-forgotten shells, ancient bits of carbon, and the remains of creatures that once swam high above but have since been repurposed into quiet organic dust. You are tucked in alongside them now, part of the slow, soft quilt that covers the bottom of the sea. The water is still, thicker in a way, less liquid, more like suspended time. It moves only when it must, nudged gently by thermohaline currents that whisper more than they push. The pressure hasn't changed. It still hugs from all sides with the familiar, wordless weight of the deep. And the temperature remains steady, just above freezing. Not cold, exactly, just absent of warmth. Not unkind, simply indifferent. And the life down here? Surprisingly abundant, though nothing seems to be in much of a rush. Within this quiet sediment live some of the world's most patient organisms. Anaerobic bacteria, so small you wouldn't notice them even if you still had eyes. Archaea that survive without sunlight, feasting not on sugar or oxygen, but on trace chemicals buried in the mud. They do not chase. They do not flee. They simply metabolize at a rate so slow it might take them centuries to notice you've joined them. And you've joined them well. As a water molecule, you may find yourself briefly absorbed into the soft tissues of one of these ancient microbes, or tucked away in the empty spaces between grains of clay. Perhaps you'll swirl gently through the microbial mats, carried by the slow diffusion of chemical gradients, ocean speak for molecules meandering toward where they're slightly less common. It's not glamorous work. But that's the point. Down here existence is humble, and humble is good. You may at times wonder if you're moving at all. The sensation is subtle, so subtle that even the sediment forgets whether it's shifting or not. Your days become less of a sequence and more of a suspension. You lose track of which moment you're in, but again, that's fine. You don't need to go anywhere. You're already here. Nestled in the ocean's softest layers, embraced by the quiet presence of unbothered organisms, you've become part of something both ancient and beautifully uneventful. The deep ocean sediment, nature's slowest welcome mat. The creatures around you don't speak, they don't blink, most of them don't even have mouths. But they are most certainly alive. Just not in any way that would ever trouble you with the inconvenience of excitement. Here, deep within the ocean floor's thick layered sediment, life exists in the quiet margins, in the fine print, in the places where oxygen forgot to arrive but where microbes showed up anyway, got comfortable, and never left. You are surrounded by some of the oldest, slowest, least dramatic life forms on the planet. Congratulations. They are not charismatic, they do not perform. They are bacteria and archaea, single-celled, quietly persistent, and deeply uninterested in your presence. Which is perfect, because you're not here to impress anyone. You're just here to be part of the scenery. Some of these microbes, called anaerobes, prefer an environment completely free of oxygen. It would be a bit too spicy for them, you see. Instead, they dine delicately on sulfates, nitrates, and tiny traces of methane. Their metabolism is so glacially slow that they might consume a single molecule of food over the course of an entire decade. Maybe two, if they're feeling extravagant. Occasionally you're drawn into one of these microscopic chemical feasts. Not eaten exactly, just borrowed. You may find yourself gently pulled into the cytoplasm of a single microbe, absorbed into its inner world, as part of a quiet chemical exchange. Inside, things happen, slowly. A metabolic reaction nudges you along. Perhaps you contribute to the production of energy. Perhaps you help with waste removal. Either way, it's a calm process. A transaction so slow and nonchalant that you're barely aware of it. And when it's over, you are released back into the sediment, unchanged and unbothered. You go from being inside a cell to being in between cells, and no one makes a fuss about it. Other times, you drift past clusters of methanogens, archaea that generate methane as a byproduct of their leisurely digestion. They're the introverts of the sediment, quietly producing tiny bubbles of gas that eventually rise unnoticed through layers of sludge and water. You may hitch a ride inside one of these bubbles one day if you're feeling adventurous, but not yet. Not today. Today is for stillness. The microbial community down here is remarkably content with its pace. Entire ecosystems operate over the course of centuries, perhaps millennia. Populations rise and fall so slowly that even geology occasionally forgets they're here. And yet, here they are, doing their work, making no noise, leaving no mess. And in the middle of it all, you, a single water molecule, drifting patiently among them, sometimes absorbed, sometimes released, sometimes nestled between grains of clay, sometimes gently nudged along a chemical pathway, but always part of the rhythm, such as it is, of this slow, unchanging world. And it is quiet here. Unimaginably quiet. The kind of quiet that could put a rock to sleep. So you rest, and let the microbes work around you. Not with purpose, not with speed, but with the kind of timeless repetition that makes even molecules feel drowsy. You may stay here for centuries, and no one would mind. Time, down here, does not tick. It settles. If there are seconds, they are very long ones. Slow, heavy things that stretch like deep-sea kelp in the current. Hours don't pass so much as dissolve. Days blur into one another, like silt stirred gently by the movement of a snail. You may have been here for a week. You may have been here for 200 years. No one is counting. And no one cares. You are surrounded by layers, layers of mud, of memory, of marine snow compacted into history. The deeper you are buried, the older the material becomes. Above you lie the soft, recent remains of life that drifted down only yesterday, or a few hundred yesterdays ago. Below you are ancient layers, the flattened ghosts of creatures that lived before humans walked upright, before whales had fins, before continents even settled into their current configurations. It's a museum with no lighting, no signage, and no doors. Just endless sediment, whispering its history in chemical traces and fossilized fragments. You are tucked quietly among it now, a single molecule among trillions, sleeping in strata. Occasionally a shift happens. Not dramatic, just a slow, imperceptible settling. A layer above you compacts a little, the pressure tightens slightly. A neighboring particle sighs and sinks a micron deeper. You move with it, obediently, as if you had a choice. You might be bound briefly to a mineral grain, clay perhaps, or maybe a speck of organic carbon that was once part of a phytoplankton. You cling for a moment, then drift free again, looping lazily between bonds and spaces, forming temporary associations with no obligations attached. Sometimes a microbe stirs, one of the long-lived, slow-living ones buried nearby. Its metabolism flickers to life, performs a transaction, then goes back to sleep for another decade. You might be invited in again, briefly, only to be let go with the same nonchalance as before. It's not personal. Nothing is personal here. The sediment moves at geological speed, that is to say, it moves, but you'll never catch it in the act. A tectonic shrug in the distant ocean crust may push this section of the seafloor upward, millimeter by millimeter over thousands of years. One day this very mud may rise into a ridge or trench. You may one day be part of a rock, but not soon, not remotely soon. For now, your role is simple. Be here. Exist quietly, bond when needed, drift when allowed, settle when invited. There are no predators, no alarms, no sense of time other than the gentle, accumulative weight of being buried just a little bit more, every century or so. And you are so deeply at rest. Not alone, never that, but entirely undisturbed. Buried in a softness that does not ask questions. A stillness that does not end. A kind of sleep you didn't realize was possible. The sleep of ancient oceans held in the quiet hush of sediment that remembers everything and demands nothing. You are not stuck. You are simply here. And that is enough. You're not entirely sure what changes first. Maybe it's a shift in salinity, a faint, wandering chemical current threading through the sediment. Maybe it's a distant tectonic grumble, inaudible but persuasive. Or maybe it's nothing dramatic at all, just gravity doing what gravity does, nudging a cluster of particles one layer deeper. But something stirs, gently. You feel yourself begin to move. Not far, not fast, just a few molecular diameters to the left, or perhaps downward, it's difficult to tell. In the deep ocean sediment, direction has always been more of a suggestion than a rule, but still, there is movement. You are being coaxed out of your resting place. No one is calling you, there's no fanfare, no light, no upward pull of destiny, it's just time. You've been here long enough. And now, the molecules around you have shifted, ever so slightly, and you, obligingly, drift with them. A change in gradient, that's all. Water, it turns out, is never truly still, not even at the bottom of the sea. There are subtle chemical differences, barely perceptible temperature variations, and ghost-like currents that drift through sediment as if trying not to be noticed. You are caught in one now, a quiet, diffusion-driven escape. You rise, though rise is generous. It's more like unnesting. Leaving your grain of clay behind, emerging from the soft cradle of sediment, like a bubble of thought rising from sleep. And above you, the ocean waits. It is no brighter than before, no warmer, still quiet, still heavy, still completely indifferent to your tiny existence, but it is open again. Full of possibility, possibility that unfolds at glacial pace and without consequence. You may go nowhere at all. Or you may begin a journey that takes centuries. Already, you are being drawn into a microscopic gradient of pressure. A flow so subtle that it doesn't ripple or churn, just leans. You lean with it, slightly, gently. Like a door swinging slowly open in a house with no wind. This is how most ocean currents begin, not with drama, but with density, salt levels, temperature layers, tiny chemical differences that quietly rearrange the entire water column. You are now part of that rearrangement. You leave the sediment behind. It does not miss you. You don't rise far, just a few centimeters, maybe less, but already the texture of your world changes. The mud gives way to fluidity again. You are among other water molecules now, free-floating once more, slipping into open ocean, with the confidence of someone who has absolutely nowhere to be. And it feels familiar. Not in a memory sense but in a structural one. You are water, you're back in water, among water. You're home again, in the most molecular way. You begin to move, not because you must, but because you can. Slowly, in no particular direction, letting the density gradients guide you, like a leaf drifting in a current it cannot see. The journey has begun, though you won't realize it for several hundred years. You are drifting now. Not in circles, not in spirals, but in a long, slow procession. A movement so unhurried it barely qualifies as motion at all. And yet, beneath the stillness of it, something immense is carrying you forward. You have entered a deep-sea current. Not the splashy kind, not the warm surface-skirting kind that races between continents and wears sunglasses. This one is different, older, quieter, colder. It is part of what oceanographers call the thermohaline circulation, or, if you're feeling poetic, the global conveyor belt. It is a system that moves entire oceans, very, very slowly. And now, you are part of it. The current you've joined flows horizontally, just above the seafloor, across vast underwater plains, and past lonely underwater ridges. You are moving through a kind of liquid continent, guided by gradients in temperature and salt concentration. Not because you have chosen to go this way, but because the ocean has arranged itself in such a way that you simply must. You are no longer lodged in mud, no longer caught in a microbial loop. You are suspended once again, entirely fluid, nudged along by an invisible hand made of physics. Around you other water molecules drift along in the same direction. Some came from melting glaciers. Some came from the polar regions, where cold water sinks and spreads like a heavy breath. Others, like you, have spent some time resting in the seafloor and are now back in circulation. No one says much, everyone is just going. And it is dark. Still dark. There is no sunlight here, hasn't been for thousands of meters. The ocean remains in its deep, unlit state, punctuated only occasionally by the faint shimmer of a bioluminescent flicker in the distance. A glowworm of the abyss, a sleepy lanternfish, a drifting jelly with lights like slow thoughts. But most of the time, it's just you, and water, and time. You pass by deep-sea lifeforms, but they pay you no attention. They are too busy surviving, or too uninterested. Some perch on thermal vents that belch warmth from the planet's crust. Others wriggle slowly across the seafloor with no visible goal in mind. And still you move. If anyone were to measure your speed, they'd laugh, or fall asleep trying. This deep-sea current travels at perhaps a few centimeters per second, maybe less. It could take 1,000 years to complete a single circuit of the globe. You're not rushing. You've got time. More time than time itself knows what to do with. And the ocean is kind enough not to hurry you. There are moments, if you can call them that, where nothing changes at all. The temperature stays constant. The salinity doesn't budge. Even the microscopic community around you remains the same. You wonder if you're stuck. But then, 1,000 miles later, you realize, no, you're not stuck. You're simply in the deep. And the deep moves differently. You let the current carry you, around submerged mountain ranges, past trenches, along vast unseen highways beneath the surface, all in a motion so slow and even that sleep feels like the most appropriate response. And so you do. You drift. And drift. And drift. The journey continues, but there is no destination, just the movement itself, and in that there is peace. The deep-sea current is not in a hurry. And neither are you. You move with it now, through the coldest, darkest parts of the ocean. Entire continental shelves drift by beneath you in complete silence. Ridges rise up like sleeping giants, and you pass over them without comment. You are a guest, in a world that barely notices guests at all. This is what's known as the abyssal layer, the portion of the ocean that lies between roughly 4,000 and 6,000 meters deep. A realm so far removed from sunlight that the concepts of day and night no longer apply. Here, time folds in on itself, and space becomes mostly hypothetical. You're never quite sure if you're moving through it, or if it's just politely rearranging itself around you. The temperature remains steady, just a hair above freezing. The pressure is unthinkably high, yet unremarkable to you. You've been under it for so long that it feels more like background music than a physical force. The darkness is thick and perfect, a soft ink-black silence that wraps around you like an idea no one speaks aloud. And all the while you move. Sometimes you drift past things. A cluster of strange creatures clinging to a hydrothermal vent. A shrimp with no eyes. A sea cucumber that seems confused, though it's unclear how one could tell. A colony of tube worms waving gently in superheated water, utterly unconcerned with your presence. You are not alone, but you are also not expected to socialize. Which is perfect. You are a water molecule in transit, not in a rush. Not even particularly aware of distance. But part of something enormous. This current you ride, this quiet river at the bottom of the sea, is just one section of a planetary system. It connects polar oceans to equators, carries nutrients from the surface to the depths and back again, regulates climate, balances salt, moves carbon, cradles memory. And here you are in the middle of it, doing absolutely nothing. Except being carried. You've been traveling like this for, well, it's hard to say, decades at least, maybe a century already. But it doesn't feel like anything. There are no clocks here. No sunsets, no seasons. Just a consistent sameness so complete that it erodes your sense of sequence. Events don't follow one another. They just exist. One long, gentle smear of deep, cold time. Occasionally the current bends slightly. Maybe it splits, one branch heading toward the Southern Ocean, another toward the Indian. You may follow either, you don't get a vote. It depends entirely on density, temperature, salinity, and 100 other variables you don't have to understand. You simply go where the water goes. And the water goes everywhere, eventually. You may spend a few hundred years down here, or more. You might one day rise slowly toward shallower waters, or be pulled down again into a trench. You might get caught in an eddy, or become part of a warm current that takes you toward the surface. But for now, you are here. Mid-voyage. Deep beneath the world. Moving at the pace of glacial memory, through a realm so consistent, so cold, so unbelievably quiet, that your very presence feels like part of the geology. And still, you drift. There is no arrival, no climax, just the journey. Long, cold, and beautifully uneventful. It doesn't feel like anything at first. One moment, you're adrift in the deep. The same darkness, the same pressure, the same slow parade of microscopic boredom. The next, well, it's still all of that, but something is ever so slightly different. You are rising. You don't know why, you don't even know how you know. But something has changed in the water around you. A faint gradient. A shift in the temperature. A pressure variation so delicate it might be mistaken for your imagination, if you still had one. But it's real. A quiet tug, not upward exactly, but upward-ish. You're not shooting toward the surface. That would be deeply unprofessional. You are easing into a new layer. Rising by fractions of a meter per year. Perhaps less. The journey upward is a long one. So long that if you tried to track your progress, you'd fall asleep. Which of course is the point. You are entering the mesopelagic zone now. This is sometimes called the twilight zone, though not because anything strange happens here, quite the opposite. It's simply the part of the ocean where sunlight almost reaches, but not quite enough to be helpful. Just enough to be vague. Light filters down as a kind of suggestion, then gives up entirely before it can make a difference. It's dim and blue, not bright blue, more like the memory of blue. And it's warmer here. Slightly, just a couple of degrees, but enough to notice if you were the sort of molecule that notices degrees. You are, in fact, the sort of molecule that experiences temperature. In the way that your bonds may stretch a little looser, your vibrations may soften, your associations may become more casual. The creatures here are different too. Not friendly necessarily, but more visible. Schools of fish with eyes tuned to faint glimmers, squid with cautious jet propulsion, lanternfish that shimmer like a half-formed thought in the dark. None of them bother you, you are beneath their notice, and happily so. Above you there is more activity, more movement, the beginning of weather, the influence of seasons. Up there, water molecules are busy, evaporating, condensing, precipitating, radiating enthusiasm about phase changes. But not you, not yet. You are simply rising. Carried by subtle thermohaline differences, pulled gently from the abyss by shifting densities, and the slow, endless choreography of Earth's great conveyor belt. It's not a promotion, it's just a stage change. You are now a part of the water column's upward motion. Still as calm as ever. Still as pointless in the best possible way. Your rise may take decades. And that's fine. There's no urgency here, no countdown. Just the deeply slow adjustment of pressure, light, and temperature. Like someone opening a curtain in millimeter increments over the course of a century. The sediment is far below you now, fading into the dark distance. The abyss has let you go, and now, you drift upward. Gently. Obediently. Aimlessly. At first, it's hard to tell what's changed. You've been rising for a while now, long enough for a tectonic plate to sigh and shift slightly beneath the ocean crust. And as you move ever so gently upward, the darkness begins to soften. Not disappear, just relax its grip. You're entering what scientists affectionately call the epipelagic zone, or, more romantically, the sunlit layer. Of course, sunlit is relative. This far down, sunlight isn't a spotlight, it's more like a suggestion, a whisper of illumination. A blue-tinged murmur that begins to seep into the world around you, scattering faintly off the backs of fish, the bellies of jellyfish, and the shifting surface of the sea above. You are still far from the actual surface, hundreds of meters perhaps, but the water is clearer here, warmer, and noticeably busier. You are surrounded now by molecules with opinions. Some are bounding with kinetic energy, flitting about with the kind of frantic enthusiasm you haven't seen since, well, ever. Others are forming and breaking bonds like it's a social event. The water feels thinner here, in a way, not in substance, but in personality. Less dense, more excitable. It's like waking up in a city after a lifetime in the countryside. And the light is patient. It doesn't arrive all at once. It trickles down from above, refracted and scattered, filtering into your world in quiet gradients of brightness. The dark blue becomes lighter. Then lighter still. You can feel the photons brushing past, not as heat, not quite, but as a kind of molecular suggestion. Up is a direction again. You drift with the current as always, but you notice the difference. There's a subtle shift in the behavior of your neighbors. Molecules are bustling now. Thermal energy is increasing. reactions are happening at a faster clip. And you, faithful little HO, are swept up in it like a guest who showed up unfashionably early to a very long party. Above you, organisms gather like solar panels with fins. Phytoplankton, those tiny chlorophyll-packed miracles, float near the surface, sipping sunlight and quietly producing half the planet's oxygen without ever demanding recognition. You might find yourself pulled momentarily into one of them, used briefly in a photosynthetic process before being politely released again. Everything here happens faster, but not so fast that you need to panic. You are still in your natural habitat. Just a new version of it. And the light? It continues to grow. Not harshly, not urgently, but persistently. The surface is closer now, still above, still distant, but no longer abstract. You are entering the realm where sunbeams actually land, where waves cast shadows, where wind ripples the sea like a sigh through silk. You are almost there. Not because you wanted to be, but because water moves, and you move with it. Upward. Always slowly. Always gently. Until the day, someday, you arrive. You're almost there. Not that there's a there in the conventional sense. The ocean doesn't have a ceiling exactly, just a threshold, a shifting, glimmering line where liquid becomes gas, and quiet becomes just a little less so. The surface. After centuries, perhaps millennia, of drifting through pitch-black stillness, compressed in silence, pressed beneath continents of water, you are now less than 100 meters from it. And it's different up here. Brighter, yes. Bluer, busier. The water is teeming with molecules whose energy levels are suspiciously high. They're bouncing, shoving, forming bubbles, evaporating, recondensing, getting caught up in evaporation gossip like it's all very urgent. You observe quietly. Your bonds remain intact. Your little hydrogen atoms stay politely attached to your oxygen atom, even as other water molecules leap into vapor with the reckless glee of unsupervised toddlers. You are not quite ready for that. You prefer to linger just below where the sun touches the sea but doesn't yet pull you into the air. The light is full now. It arrives in long golden shafts that dance across your surface. You don't see it, of course. You have no eyes. But you feel it in the way the temperature tickles your vibrations. The photons arrive like tourists, full of energy, bouncing off everything, making things warmer than strictly necessary. You might drift near the boundary, float up toward the meniscus, but not all the way. Not just yet. Because here, in this liminal zone, where water meets sky, there is something wonderfully still. A kind of balance. You are neither pulled downward by pressure nor whisked away by evaporation. You exist in a kind of suspension. Hovering. The surface tension holds you, almost like a skin. Above, the atmosphere waits. Invisible gases drifting, swirling, forming clouds, storms, and the occasional sunrise. You are not part of that world yet. But you could be. One day. With enough sunlight, enough heat, enough push from below. But for now, you're perfectly placed. Drifting near the boundary, resting in the gentle upper layers of the sea. Around you, plankton glide. Tiny fish dart. The occasional ray of light flickers past, refracted into a drowsy kaleidoscope. You may even find yourself pulled into the edge of a current, one of those lazy, swirling eddies that lingers near the surface before deciding what to do next. The journey has changed. It isn't over. It never really ends, of course. Molecules like you don't stop. You may evaporate next. Or be swallowed by a whale. or pulled into the gills of a fish, or become part of a raindrop weeks from now. The possibilities are endless, and completely indifferent to your preferences. But for now, you are here. Just below the surface, just above the deep, perfectly suspended between two worlds, not quite rising anymore, not yet falling again. Still, and entirely at rest. It begins with warmth. Not a blast, not a sizzle, just a subtle shimmer in the water around you. The sunlight, which until now has been something of a pleasant background feature, becomes more persuasive. It slips into the top layer of the sea and starts nudging molecules, softly at first, then insistently. You are among those near the surface now, that uppermost sliver of ocean where energy from the sun actually matters. And you are starting to feel it. Your fellow water molecules are getting jittery. The extra thermal energy excites their bonds. Some begin to bounce more enthusiastically. They vibrate. They jostle. A few break away from the crowd and fling themselves into the open air above, with the reckless confidence of steam. You do not immediately join them. You're not impulsive, you're thorough. So you stay just below the meniscus, absorbing just enough energy to loosen your molecular ties. The hydrogen bonds that have kept you securely nestled among your neighbors begin to stretch, to weaken, to fray. And then, at some point that could never be pinned to a single moment, you are free. You evaporate. Not with fanfare, not with steam. This isn't boiling. It's evaporation, the subtle, casual migration of a single water molecule from liquid to vapor. You slip past the surface tension like it's not even there. One moment you're in the sea, the next you are above it, in the air. You are now a gas. A vapor. An unanchored, airborne version of yourself. And the view is confusing. You've spent eons underwater, where everything is filtered and fluid and dim. Up here in the atmosphere the world is, well, bright, uncomfortably so. The sun is no longer a rumor, it's a blazing presence in the sky. The air molecules around you are fewer, faster, and far more chaotic. Nitrogen. Oxygen. The occasional carbon dioxide molecule drifting by like it owns the place. They don't notice you, no one does. You are just one more vapor molecule in a vast sky of motion. But you're also newly liberated. You have space now, you can move. You can drift upward, sideways, or in small, slow circles that serve no purpose whatsoever. And, most importantly, no one's stopping you. Up here, temperature rules everything, and for the moment it's warm enough to keep you airborne. The sea stretches out below, a shimmering expanse of blue. You can see its ripples from above now, a perspective you've never had. You're part of the air now, but you carry the memory of the deep. The silence. The pressure. The slow drift of time. And now you rise, little by little, on air currents so gentle they feel like thoughts. You are lighter now. Less certain. But still, somehow, completely yourself. Water. But vapor. And free. You wouldn't call it flying. That would imply wings or intention or control of any kind. No, what's happening now is something far simpler and far more atmospheric. You are being carried. Lifted, really. Drawn upward by an updraft. A gentle rising current of warm air, born from the sun's uneven heating of the Earth's surface. It's nothing personal. The ocean warmed, the air above it warmed, and now that air is rising. and you, being small and gassy and conveniently nearby, are simply along for the ride. Up you go. Not like a bird. More like a speck of steam that has absolutely no say in the matter. You rise through the lower troposphere, which sounds more dramatic than it is. It's just the part of the sky closest to the Earth's surface. You pass through layers of air, each slightly cooler than the last. A subtle gradient. A slow climb. Like walking up the world's longest staircase in slow motion while wearing socks and being gently nudged from behind. Around you, other vapor molecules rise too. A whole invisible migration of evaporated ocean, all drifting upward on a shared thermal ambition they didn't choose. Some are destined to form clouds. Others will be pushed sideways by winds, rerouted by mountains, or reabsorbed into the sea by the whims of atmospheric pressure. You don't know which fate is yours yet. You're just here, rising, with all the grace and intention of a balloon someone accidentally let go of. The world below begins to shrink. You can see more now. The surface of the ocean blurs into distant coastlines. The line between sea and sky softens, hazy with humidity. You rise past seabirds, kites, and the occasional stray insect who made a poor life choice. And then, suddenly, but softly, it's colder. The temperature drops as you ascend. The molecules around you begin to huddle more tightly, moving a little slower, holding a little less energy. You're still water vapor, but you can feel your bonds reconsidering their freedom. You're still floating, still light, but less so. The atmosphere here is thinner, quieter, there's more space between molecules, fewer collisions, the pace slows. Time, already unhurried in the ocean, stretches even further in the open sky. No one notices you up here, no one would think to. You are invisible. Weightless. Suspended on the back of a warm breeze that's already starting to cool. There is no rush, the wind doesn't sprint, the sky does not push. You are simply caught in the act of moving upward, slowly, with the serenity of a thought halfway to forgetting what it was. And just when it seems like you might drift forever, the temperature dips a little further, and you begin to feel ready. Ready for something new. Or at least, different. But not yet. For now you rise. Light as breath. Soft as possibility. You've been drifting in the atmosphere for some time now. Exactly how long is hard to say. Time up here doesn't tick in seconds. It dilates, stretches, yawns. The sun arcs gently overhead. Air currents nudge you sideways, upward, occasionally downward, but never with urgency. Just the kind of casual turbulence that feels more like a suggestion than a command. And then, something shifts. Not loudly, not quickly. The air grows colder, not icy, just noticeably cool, as if the sky has exhaled and forgotten to breathe in again. You, still in vapor form, start to slow. Your energetic jiggles, which were once bold and bouncy, are now more hesitant. The gaps between collisions with other molecules have widened. And when you do bump into your fellow water vapor, the collisions linger, stick even. The invisible becomes visible. Tiny droplets begin to form, not all at once, not in a grand unveiling, just here and there, a little bead of condensed moisture, suspended in the air like a newborn thought. You are one of them. Without drama or sound, or any sense of personal agency, you condense. Not fully. Not firmly. Just enough for your atoms to pause and say, yes, this will do. You reunite with other HO molecules, forming a minuscule droplet. A seed of something larger. A point of cohesion. You are no longer vapor, you are liquid again, but this time airborne. And here's the strange part, you're still floating. That's the miracle of clouds. They are made of liquid water suspended in air, tiny droplets light enough to hang in place, held aloft by gentle updrafts and the subtle mechanics of buoyancy. You are now part of one. A cloud. A pale, drifting congregation of condensed water molecules. You, and billions of your kind, gathered in the sky in quiet formation. It's not exactly crowded, each droplet keeps its distance, but it is communal in the most passive, atmospheric way. The view is different from in here. From inside a cloud, the sky is not blue, it is soft, dim, diffuse. Light doesn't shine so much as settle, scattering in all directions. There are no sharp shadows, no clear edges, just layers of pale gray and quiet white, like the world is wrapped in gauze. It's peaceful. Not that you were ever stressed, as a molecule. But here, in this cloud, even the concept of urgency feels absurd. You are held. Suspended. Waiting. For what? That's not your concern. Molecules don't forecast weather, you exist, you condense, you continue. At some point, minutes from now, or hours, or days, the cloud will make a decision. Or rather, physics will, and you may fall as rain. Or hail, or mist. Or perhaps the wind will lift you higher still, letting you freeze into ice, becoming part of a snowflake or crystal. But that's later. For now you're simply condensed. Soft. Silent. Floating in the slow breath of the sky. You feel it before it happens. A subtle shift. A quiet release. The updrafts that once held you aloft grow tired. Not resentful. Just done. The warm air that kept your cloud buoyant has cooled, and your once feather-light droplet, your tiny, suspended self, now feels ever so slightly heavier than the air around it. And that's all it takes. You begin to fall. Not plummet, this isn't a nosedive, you are still a water droplet, not a meteor. The descent is gentle, measured. You might even call it polite. Like returning a borrowed coat to the ocean with the same care it gave you when it loaned it to you centuries ago. You fall through the cloud layer first. A slow-motion cascade through billions of your fellow droplets. Some fall faster, others slower. Some will evaporate before they reach the ground. Others will bump into neighbors and merge, becoming fatter, rounder, more confident in their gravitational journey. You remain modest, mid-sized, focused. The air thickens slightly as you descend. Temperature increases by degrees. Nothing jarring, just a long, lazy slide down the atmosphere's gentle thermal slope. Wind curls around you. Not enough to blow you off course, but enough to twirl you slightly, like a leaf descending in a spiral. It's not disorienting, it's just floaty. Comfortable. Like you're taking the long way down because, really, what's the rush? Below, the land begins to take shape. You can see it now, not clearly, but in form. A darkened patchwork of greens and grays and blues, trees, hills, roofs, rivers. You might land on any of them. You might splash into a stream, or vanish into a sidewalk crack, or settle gently onto a leaf. Or maybe you'll miss the land entirely and rejoin the ocean. You don't choose. You just fall. The sky continues to breathe around you, rising air, falling droplets, crosswinds, like gentle whispers guiding your descent. No two droplets fall quite the same way. You are on your own little path, charted by invisible pressures and the quiet persuasion of gravity. And somewhere down there, something will receive you. But not just yet. For now you are falling. Softly. Slowly. With no resistance, no protest, no plan. You're nearly there. After drifting, floating, condensing and descending, you one quietly persistent water droplet are about to land. You've passed through miles of atmosphere, brushed against unseen winds, and shared space with 1,000 fellow droplets, all tumbling through the same loosely choreographed ballet. Now the Earth is rising to meet you. It doesn't rush, it never does, but it's there, waiting with open terrain. You don't land in a puddle, or a river, or any of the usual watery suspects. You find something much more absorbent. Soil. Rich, loamy, cool to the touch. A patient patch of earth that's been quietly inhaling rainfall for millennia. When you make contact, there's no splash, no bounce, no ceremony. You are absorbed. Drawn in. Not aggressively. This isn't quicksand. It's a soft, sponge-like welcome. You pass from surface tension into subterranean calm, with the ease of a thought slipping into sleep. You travel downward, past roots that drink gently from the moisture around them, past sand grains and mineral flecks, past tiny underground creatures who don't notice you, and wouldn't care if they did. Deeper still, the soil becomes darker, denser, more composed. You join a vast, slow congregation of other water molecules making their way down through capillaries of dirt and stone. There's no rush. This part of the cycle doesn't believe in urgency. You might spend days here, weeks, months even, settled within the root zone, cooled, shielded, forgotten by the sky but not yet committed to anything else. This is the in-between stage. Not liquid sky, not ocean deep. Not vapor, not ice. Just water, present, still. Saturating the soil with the kind of quiet usefulness only plants and microbes truly appreciate. And if you listen closely, not with ears, but with the strange molecular patience you've developed across your travels, you can hear it, the slow percolation of water below you. A geological drip, time in liquid form moving through stone. You are part of that now. Not dramatic, not remarkable, but undeniably essential. And so you rest. Nestled in the earth. A molecule on pause. Waiting for whatever comes next. It starts the way most things in your life do now, gradually. You're still nestled in the soil, moist, dark and utterly unhurried, but little by little, the pore spaces around you grow heavier. Other droplets arrive. Recent rainfall, like you. Some came down harder, some more gently. But all of them, over time, end up here. In the same silent company, beneath the surface. And as the soil grows more saturated, its hospitality shifts. The root hairs stop absorbing, the capillaries are full, the soil is politely but firmly declining further visitors. And so you move. Not up, not sideways. Just a patient, downward seepage. Gravity hasn't forgotten you, it never does. It doesn't yell or shove, it just tugs. Softly, persistently. And you, a humble molecule, with very little opinion on the matter, go along with it. You slip deeper into the ground, navigating a subterranean maze that was never built for clarity. There are no road signs here. No tunnels labeled groundwater or stream this way, just a million tiny decisions made by pressure, density and the occasional mineral boundary. Sometimes you move quickly, through sand or gravel, where the gaps are generous. Other times you crawl through clay, where progress is measured in molecules per day. There's no right way to seep, there's just the way you go. And eventually, after all that vertical wandering, you arrive somewhere wetter. Somewhere flowing. Maybe it's a shallow aquifer. Or the upper edge of a groundwater table. Maybe a tiny underground stream that never sees the sky. You don't know the name of the place, and you don't need to. All you know is, you're no longer soaking into things. You're moving through them. You are now part of flow. Slow, deliberate groundwater flow. Not the kind you see in rivers. This is sneakier. More stoic. The sort of movement that takes years to travel a few meters. A subterranean pilgrimage made of patience and pressure gradients. You glide past buried roots, past crumbling bits of stone, past bubbles of trapped air and ancient fossils that long ago stopped noticing water. Sometimes you rise toward the surface again, drawn up into spring water or seepage. Sometimes you plunge deeper, into rock layers that haven't seen the sun in tens of thousands of years. You might end up in a river, a lake, a well. You might get pulled into a tree and breathed out through a leaf. You might just keep flowing. But not now. For now you simply seep. Softly. Invisibly. Following the quiet logic of water underground. You didn't plan on going anywhere. But water rarely stays still for long. After resting within the cool, dark hush of the subsurface, after seeping, sliding, lingering, you find yourself slowly drawn into motion once again, not pushed, not swept, just nudged. The gradient tilts ever so slightly, the pressure around you shifts, and suddenly you're part of something bigger. A flow. Groundwater flow. It is not dramatic. This is not a river with ideas. This is the patient tide beneath the land, moving in inches per month, sometimes less, sometimes more, the slow heartbeat of the earth's hidden plumbing. You do not rush. You follow. Down through aquifers, those porous rock layers resting between less porous ones, sandstone, gravel beds, layers of compacted shell and time. Some of your fellow molecules have been here for decades, others for millennia, and yet, none of them are in a hurry. That's the gift of groundwater. It doesn't care how long anything takes. It moves like a thought half remembered, a promise no one intends to keep anytime soon. You pass through chambers that echo with minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron, bits of the earth that cling to you as you drift by. You're becoming slightly harder, chemically speaking, a tiny participant in the long, slow process of making water hard, although this still means you're just politely carrying a few ions around with you. No one complains. Eventually the rock becomes more fractured, the space between grains grows wider, flow increases. You start to feel momentum, not much, just the geological version of a firm handshake. And then, like rounding a slow bend in a dream, you begin to sense something familiar. The pull. That ancient oceanward call you once knew well. You're still underground, yes, but now, unmistakably, you're heading back. Through seeps and springs, through crevices and cuts in the bedrock. Sometimes, you hear the rumble of human activity above. Wells, pumps, aqueducts you'll never touch. Sometimes, you don't hear anything at all. Just silence, and flow. Always flow. The minerals begin to drop away as you near the surface again. The rock gives way to gravel, the gravel to soil, the soil to open air. And there, finally, light. Not blinding. Just the soft ambient glow of a world above ground. You emerge quietly, without announcement, into a freshwater stream. A tiny one, the kind that trickles more than it flows, but to you it feels like freedom. You've rejoined the surface. Still liquid, still loyal to the law of gravity, and still headed, ever so gently, toward the sea. You're above ground now. Not soaring through the clouds, not plummeting from the sky, just gliding along the surface, gently, aimlessly, content to follow whatever the land decides. You've become part of a stream. Narrow, modest, and mostly unnoticed, it babbles politely over stones and between tufts of grass as if trying not to wake anything. You're carried forward, around bends carved by 1,000 years of molecules just like you, quietly shaping the landscape one soft nudge at a time. The stream gathers strength. A trickle becomes a ribbon. A ribbon becomes a flow. Other droplets join from tributaries and rainfall and melting snow miles upstream. You don't greet them, there's no need. You simply merge, becoming one of many and more than the sum. Together, you pass moss-covered logs and roots dipped into the water like sleepy toes. Birds skim the surface now and then. Insects dance above you, practicing their hovering technique. But none of it matters to you. You're water. You don't look around, you don't look ahead, you just follow the slope. The stream becomes a river. Its banks widen, the current deepens. Stones grow more rounded, worn smooth by your cousins who passed this way before you, decade after decade after decade. Villages appear in the distance, then cities. You might drift past a bridge, or under the shade of trees planted long ago. You might pass pollution, detritus, even the odd sneaker. But these are just passing details. You don't linger on them, you're moving now, and nothing sticks for long. Eventually you begin to notice something curious. The water around you changes. It smells slightly different, tastes different too in the way water somehow does when it's approaching the sea. You've reached the estuary. The place where rivers begin to lose their grip and the ocean starts to draw you in, not with force but suggestion. The current slows here, not dramatically, just enough to feel like you're drifting more than flowing. You hover in brackish indecision, fresh water fading into salt. Some of your companions may split off here, pulled into reeds or marshes or tidal creeks. Some might get stuck in sediment, or swallowed by a thirsty root. You keep going. Salt swirls gently into your world now, not all at once, just a whisper of the ocean's chemistry, a hint of the place you once came from. And still, the current carries you forward. Wide open water stretches ahead, the estuary loses its shape, its banks growing vague and uncertain. And then, somewhere just beyond the last muddy plume of river sediment, you are back. The ocean has returned. And you, without realizing quite when it happened, are part of it again. There is no clear boundary. No dotted line, no welcome sign that says you are now entering the ocean. Just water. Water all around you. Some of it still tastes like river, some of it unmistakably ocean, but most of it is something in between, blending, swirling, settling. You're not dropped into the sea, you're absorbed. There's no splash, no grand reunion, you just become part of it again. The salinity rises, molecule by molecule. The currents grow wider, more confident. Tides breathe in and out. You don't resist. You're a water molecule, and this is what you're made for, to follow the subtlest cues of motion, pressure, salt and time. And so you drift. Maybe you stay near the coast for a while, mingling with estuarine currents and microscopic algae, brushing past the lazy fins of a fish with no particular destination. Maybe you're caught in a surface current, tugged gently out to sea. Maybe you sink, just a little, into cooler waters that hum with the memory of ancient tides. You don't choose, you are chosen by the rhythm of the ocean itself. It remembers you, even if you don't remember it. This is the water that held you for thousands of years before your last trip to the sky. The same deep, slow-moving basin that made you a part of its stillness. Once upon a time. The ocean doesn't mind if you left, it's always known you'd come back. And now that you're here, it makes no demands. There are no plans, no responsibilities. Just the vast, salty calm of belonging to something larger. Around you the temperature begins to shift. The surface light grows dimmer, muted by plankton, particles and gentle waves. But there's nothing to fear. You've done this before. You are once again a speck of water in an ocean. Unbothered. Unremarkable. Essential. You slip quietly into the folds of the current, a molecule indistinguishable from billions of others. Not anonymous, but perfectly, blissfully ordinary. You are home. And you are drifting. Softly. You begin at the surface, again. That shimmering sun-dappled skin of the ocean, where waves chatter and light flickers through ripples. You bob here for a while. The top few meters, the uppermost shelf of ocean life. It's busy, in its own drifting way. You share space with plankton and pollen, bits of seaweed and microplastic, the occasional larval crab with ideas far above its station. The temperature is pleasant, the motion gentle. It would be easy to stay here, if the ocean didn't have other ideas. But it does. Because even up here gravity is patient. And your salinity has changed, ever so slightly, since your re-entry. You've picked up just enough salt to be denser than some of the other molecules around you. Not dramatically, you don't sink like a rock. You settle, slowly, a dignified descent. Down, through the sunlit zone. Light begins to thin as you pass 10 meters, then 20, then more. The brilliant flicker fades to soft blue, the blue fades to gray, and the gray, in time, becomes black. You're not alone, of course. A million other molecules are sinking with you. A slow procession of salt and water, dust and memory. Some are caught in marine snow, those gentle flurries of organic debris drifting from above. Bits of dead plankton. Tiny fecal pellets, microscopic leftovers. You don't mind, you're not picky about the company. And the deeper you go, the more the ocean changes. It grows colder. Not unkindly, just quiet and cold in the way deep things are. Pressure increases, not suddenly, but inevitably. You feel it in the way your movement tightens. The current grows slower, broader, more deliberate. This is not a place for hurry. This is a place where water settles into slowness. And eventually, you reach the thermocline, that invisible boundary where warm surface waters give way to the chill of the deep. And you cross it. Not with fanfare, just with gravity. You are now in the deep ocean once again. A returning guest, older, denser, and more experienced than the last time you came down. You don't remember how long it's been. But the ocean does. And it welcomes you, with a silence so complete it almost sounds like rest. You are far below the surface now. The last photons left you behind somewhere around 1,000 meters ago. That's about a kilometer of water between you and the sky. And with every slow meter downward, light becomes less relevant. Welcome to the midnight zone. It's not midnight in any clock-based sense, just permanently dark. The kind of darkness that doesn't change with time. A place where there are no mornings, no evenings. Only the long, quiet absence of day. Your fellow travelers are few, and most are unbothered by your presence. A drifting siphonophore pulses nearby, its translucent body stitched together like a parade of ghostly beads. A squid passes without much urgency. Occasionally a bioluminescent flicker goes off somewhere in the distance, like someone forgot to turn off a tiny underwater lamp. But mostly it's stillness. You don't explore. You just fall. Not fast, not in a straight line. More like a leaf through water, turned this way and that by long, slow currents that forgot what urgency was centuries ago. You pass between particles, dust, decay, microfauna. You slide along thermal layers, slip around blobs of colder or saltier water, cross chemical gradients that would be thrilling if you were the kind of molecule that got excited. You're not. You're just here. And the ocean around you is very, very large. You drift past a sea cucumber the size of a small dog. It's upside down, as usual. You drift past the sinking husk of a jellyfish, elegantly unraveling as it returns to the carbon cycle. Everything here seems to be either decomposing, bioluminescing, or just quietly enduring. It suits you. The pressure here is intense, hundreds of times more than what you felt at the surface. But you don't feel it. Water molecules are immune to the anxiety of psi. You're designed for this, shaped for it. No matter how deep you go, you stay exactly yourself. Around you, slow-moving currents begin to form. These are the deep thermohaling flows, the great conveyor belts of the ocean's hidden architecture. They're not in a rush either. These currents take centuries to complete a circuit. You could join one and not surface again for 1,000 years. And you might. Not yet. For now, you're still descending, slowly, patiently. Toward the bottom again. Back toward the floor of the world. Back to where the silence is thick enough to float on. You are nearly there. The descent has slowed to a murmur, as if even gravity has grown sleepy. Below you lies the abyssal plain. So vast and uneventful, it feels more imagined than real. A continent of mud, silt, and time. There are no cliffs here, no coral reefs, no noise. Just flatness, fading into flatness, in all directions. And now, you touch down. Not with a sound, not even with a puff of silt. Just a gentle contact, so subtle, you almost don't notice. You are simply no longer falling. You've arrived. You are now part of the deep sea floor again, nestled between specks of dust that haven't moved in centuries. The temperature hovers just above freezing. The pressure is unthinkable, and yet, everything here seems unbothered by such facts. Around you, there is no movement, no bustle, no light. Occasionally, the faint outline of a sea star drags itself across the plain with glacial grace. Now and then, something resembling a shrimp floats sideways and disappears again. But for the most part, there is stillness. Profound, unapologetic stillness. You, being water, are not out of place. You ease into the sediment, perhaps into a pore space between grains of sand, or into the microfilm coating a pebble that hasn't rolled in 10,000 years. It doesn't matter. Everything here is content to wait. You might stay for a few hours. You might stay for a few thousand years. There's no schedule, no tide tugging you onward just yet. You are in the part of the ocean where time forgets to pass. And here, even molecules can rest. You don't dream. But if you did, they would be slow, mineral-scented dreams, thick with ancient pressure and the whisper of currents long gone. There is no urge to rise. No need to evaporate. No excitement, no change. Just the deep, old calm of being still. And you, molecule that you are, settle into it completely. You are still. Perfectly, marvelously still. You've settled into the sediment of the abyssal plain, miles beneath the surface of the ocean, tucked away in a darkness that doesn't change. There's no current here, no motion, no light to chase or schedule to keep. You are where you are, and you do not need to be anywhere else. You might be nestled between two silt particles, or loosely held within the gelatinous matrix of some ancient marine snow, whatever remains of a drifting flake of plankton decay that fell here months ago. The details are fuzzy, that's fine. You're not here to remember details, you're here to be still. Above you the ocean moves, currents swirl in distant layers. Fish flicker through the upper zones. But none of that reaches you. The world you now inhabit is muffled, tucked in. A waterlogged library of forgotten things. Time does pass, technically. Not that you'd notice. Hours blend into days, days blur into years. Eventually you stop trying to measure. There are no clocks on the seafloor, no light to mark a dawn or dusk, just endless variations of the same unbroken silence. You aren't alone, exactly. There are other molecules here, countless others, but none of them speak. There's no chit-chat in sediment. Everyone's too busy resting. Sometimes something stirs. A sea cucumber might trundle by, leaving a brief looping trail in the mud. A brittle star might wave a delicate limb and then rethink it. Microbes, trillions of them, go about their unseen business, breaking things down, building things up, repeating this until entropy sighs in agreement. You aren't busy, but you're not bored either. Because boredom requires wanting something different. And you don't. You are in a place where even wanting has been quieted. No plans, no direction, no urgency to return to the sky, or the surface, or the nearest raindrop. Just the long, dim stillness of being part of the ocean's floor. And the most remarkable part, this is normal. For many water molecules, this is the default. Surface travel, evaporation, ice, clouds, rivers, those are the exciting bits, the outliers. But this slow seep into sediment, this long pause in the deep, this is the bulk of your resume. Stillness is your specialty. And here, you're doing your finest work. Without moving at all. Eventually you sink even further. Not by choice, not by force. Just by inevitability. A gentle tug, a slow filtering downward, you move from loose surface silt into something denser. A fine-grained layer of mud that hasn't been disturbed since long before the continents got comfortable with their current arrangement. This is no longer ocean water exactly. It's pore water now. Tiny pockets of liquid trapped between mineral grains and ancient detritus. Here, you are technically still water, but your lifestyle is distinctly more sedentary. You squeeze between clay particles, brushing against the fossilized outline of something that was once vaguely fish-shaped. You pass through mineral walls so thin they feel like polite suggestions. You pause in voids the size of a bacterium's elbow. Nothing rushes you. Above you, the sediment continues to accumulate, millimeter by millimeter, century by century, a soft, unbothered rain of organic leftovers and geological gossip. You are slowly, peacefully buried in the ocean's paperwork. And it's perfect. The deeper you go, the older the material becomes. You pass through thin layers of oceanic memory, each a different hue of brown, gray, or mysterious green. There are traces of iron here, manganese nodules. Maybe a single foraminiferous shell with dreams of stardom. It never made it. You're now neighbors. The pressure increases, of course, it always does. But you're not pressed, you are simply held, more snugly, more still. Temperature, barely above freezing. Oxygen, minimal if any. Excitement? Negligible. And yet, this zone hums with an invisible sort of life, the kind that doesn't need light, or heat, or speed. Anaerobic bacteria shuffle electrons, like sleepy accountants. Chemical gradients drift lazily across millimeters of muck. Carbon compounds are recycled with ceremonial slowness. You're technically part of the biosphere, just a very quiet part. And you are in no hurry to leave. You could stay here for centuries. You might be part of the mineral cycle next. You might become a component of a clay lattice. You might just sit there, tucked away in the same cubic micron of mud, while the world forgets what century it is. It doesn't matter. You're doing exactly what's needed. Which in this case is nothing at all. And you're doing it flawlessly. Time at this point is a rumor. There are no clocks in the sediment, no ticking, no tides, no sunrise to glance at. Even decay has slowed to a crawl. And you've mastered the art of not moving. Not metaphorically. Literally. You haven't changed position in years. Possibly centuries. You are one water molecule nestled in a stable pore of deep marine sediment. Somewhere below the bottom of the ocean, quietly waiting for nothing in particular. And it's wonderful. Above you the world spins, storms come and go, whale songs rise and fall, ice melts, rain forms, river deltas shift. But none of it touches you. None of it asks anything of you. You are so deeply tucked into this layer of mineral history that you've become part of the background hum of the planet. Somewhere nearby, a bacterial cell completes a reaction cycle so slowly it might be mistaken for hibernation. Another bacterium digests something prehistoric. Then it stops. Possibly forever. And still, you wait. You wait through seasons that don't reach you. You wait through tectonic sighs, through tiny shifts in ocean chemistry, through the occasional ripple of seismic curiosity that fades before it arrives. You are not stuck. You are simply still. You might one day be lifted again, swept up by a deep disturbance, nudged into the path of a migrating burrower, or dislodged by the rare event known as something happening. But not now. Now you are in the great pause. The long inhale before the next cycle, the space between moments. The part of the story where the narrator sets down the book and just listens to the silence. And in this silence, you are not forgotten. You are essential. You are continuity. You are the molecule that waited. And in a planet full of motion, you are a small, quiet proof that stillness too is a kind of journey. It starts with a nudge. Not a shove. Not even a push, really. More like a suggestion. A polite gravitational whisper through the sediment, so slow, so faint, you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't been absolutely still for the past several hundred years. And because you were, you do. Something has changed. The mineral walls that framed you begin to shift, just a micron or two. A pressure gradient adjusts. A pore opens somewhere upstream in the direction of downhill, which, in this context, means eventually toward the center of the Earth. But you're not going that far. Instead, you begin to move laterally, slowly, slowly, carried by what oceanographers charmingly call interstitial flow. It is not a current exactly, it is not dramatic. No one has ever surfed it. It is a seepage, a shuffle, the quietest form of motion that still technically counts as motion. And it's moving you. You squeeze through mineral grains that have not been rearranged in recorded human history. You bump against silt that fell in the time of the mammoths. You meander through the micro-labyrinth of clay and shell, following gradients you're not even aware of. Above you, the ocean remains oblivious. The surface may be storming, sunlight may be filtering down through the upper zones, whole ecosystems may be exploding in flashes of life and death. But here, in the twilight crawl beneath the seafloor, you are a slow traveler on the ancient Aquifer Express. Your path is indirect. You twist sideways, backward, slightly upward. Sometimes you stop for a decade or two, wedged in a spot where nothing seems interested in helping you forward. Then, quietly, you resume. This is not navigation. This is patience. You are not the captain, you are the cargo. A passive passenger, in one of Earth's slowest, most stubborn conveyor belts. The deep subterranean water cycle. You are in fact being reintroduced to the idea of motion. And though you'll never admit it aloud, it's not entirely unwelcome. Because after all that stillness, there's something oddly satisfying about drifting again. About being part of something faintly directional. You don't know where you're headed. But it's somewhere. And that's enough. For now. You are officially in motion. That's not to say anyone would notice. From the outside, you still appear motionless. Just another invisible water molecule, lodged in some anonymous pore within 1,000 meters of packed sediment. But internally, within the secret geometry of Earth's undersea plumbing, you're drifting. This is the deep conveyor. Not the grand one they teach in textbooks with arrows across oceans and terms like thermohaline circulation. No, this is the less famous cousin. The slow motion, below the floorboards version. The deep, dark, subterranean seep. Down here, flow means something very different. It means maybe a meter per century. Maybe. On a good day. You are part of a migration that began before recorded history and will continue long after human civilization has filed its final tax return. Your neighbors are other molecules. Some water, some not. Silica ghosts. Carbon fragments. A lonely nitrate ion who hasn't spoken in a millennium. You're not exactly friends, but you're going the same direction, which is often enough. You drift through layers of clay and ooze, passing relics of long-dead marine creatures, fossil plankton, and the occasional mystery particle no one's been able to classify. Some bits are organic, some mineral, some both. Some are so old they've become stories, others never had a story to begin with. You're not in a hurry, no one is. This conveyor doesn't rush. It creeps, it whispers, it exists. And that's all it needs to do. Every now and then there's a tiny opening in the sediment, an unexpected gap, a looser patch, a stretch of less compacted material, and in those brief moments, you speed up. If such a thing can be said at a scale of millimeters per decade. You pass through these gaps with the cautious glee of a molecule that has learnt not to expect excitement. And then you're back to the slow slide, to the press of mineral walls, to the almost glacial shuffle of poor water's great crawl. And still, you move. Not toward anything urgent, not toward revelation or revelation's cousin, surprise. Just along. One unremarkable micron at a time. You are water, you are patience. You are the quiet continuation of the deepest part of the water cycle, where the only rule is, keep going, eventually. And still you go. Not fast. Not far, but enough. Enough to be no longer where you were. Enough to know that movement, even on this scale, can accumulate into something meaningful, eventually. Probably. if anyone were patient enough to keep track, which, fortunately, they are not. You continue sliding through the underlayers of the seafloor, guided by gradients too subtle to map, and forces too ancient to notice. It's not so much a journey as a gentle relocation. A reassignment of place, delivered by geology's softest voice. Occasionally you find yourself in slightly different company. Perhaps you spend a few decades alongside some hydrogen sulfide molecules, quiet types, a bit moody, not especially chatty. Then you pass through a pocket of methane, which seems to be having a long existential moment. And then for a few years, it's just other water molecules again, just like you, drifting for no clear reason, bonded loosely to one another in the great unspoken rhythm of planetary plumbing. You don't resist it. You've long since given up on the idea that motion requires purpose, or that speed is somehow more noble than slowness. Here in the deep you begin to understand that duration is its own kind of accomplishment. Somewhere above, tectonic plates grind softly across one another. Somewhere far away, a volcano puffs out its breath at the bottom of the ocean. And somewhere further still, sunlight pierces the surface of a tropical lagoon, vaporizing your cousins into skyward freedom. But you're still going. Still easing through a narrow path that didn't exist last century, heading towards somewhere you've never needed to define. The pressure holds you in a gentle embrace. The temperature reminds you that this is no place for urgency. The sediment wall murmurs familiar, mineral nonsense in your passing. You are not lost. You are not late. You are part of a process too slow to measure, and too old to rush. And that, in the end, is precisely the pace the deep prefers. No trumpet sounds. No grand shift. No sudden clarity. Just a soft, barely perceptible tilt. You're still buried, of course. Still snuggled in a cozy lattice of minerals and sediment. Still drifting through interstitial pathways that feel more like geological veins than currents. But now, somehow, you are moving ever so slightly upward. Not directly, that would be too obvious. No, this is the kind of ascent that takes detours. You're rerouted through side channels and slanted voids, rising by millimeters, then pausing for a few decades to reflect on what a millimeter even is. Technically this is groundwater flow. Or possibly diagenetic rebound. Or perhaps you're being carried in a pressure-driven loop that even the most dedicated marine geochemist wouldn't bother to diagram. Whatever the reason, you're going up. Barely. And it feels like a major development. Not that the environment has changed much, the sediment is still dense. The temperature remains low. The neighbors haven't spoken in centuries. And the ambient mood is still, let's not do anything rash. But you've noticed a shift, a lightening, a gentle easing of the weight above you. This is what progress looks like, in the deep ocean's basement. A small incline, a subtle easing of confinement, the faint, almost romantic idea of direction. You are water. You are older than memory. You are also on the move. There's no destination, no plan, just the quiet mechanics of a cycle resuming itself, like a thought you'd forgotten you were having. It's still dark, still quiet, still so slow that even time can't be bothered to measure it properly. But something is different now. You are no longer sinking. And in this realm, that's practically a revolution. To the untrained eye, which thankfully no one has down here, you appear to be wandering. Your path is not vertical, not even diagonal. It's more interpretive. A slow, spiraling drift through fine-grained layers of clay, carbonate, and ancient organic, remains pressed into memory foam by the weight of ages. But there is a pattern, of sorts. You are rising through sediment that remembers the Ice Age, through pockets of ooze that haven't seen the sun since the continents looked different. You pass through a thin band of ash from a volcano that erupted before language existed. Then a dark smear of organic matter, deposited when trilobites still had plans. Each layer has its own texture, its own particular resistance. Some are tight and stubborn, pressing back against your passage. Others are soft, welcoming, almost lazy in how little they care that you're drifting through. This is the geological version of polite small talk. The chalk nods at you, the clay sighs, the silts shuffle aside, just a little. You are, in every sense, a slow interruption. No one minds. Every so often, a tremor somewhere deep below sends a barely there ripple through the sediment. You feel it in the way a sleeping cat might sense a change in weather, without concern and without plans to do anything about it. You continue upward. Still water, still quiet, still under immense pressure, though perhaps just the tiniest bit less than before. Molecule by molecule, the neighborhood has started to change. The minerals are less compact. The microbial residents are marginally more active. The pore spaces are slightly more open, like a landscape easing into its own breath. You pass a benthic burrow, long abandoned, now just a ghost tunnel carved into silt. No one home, just the memory of motion. And all the while, you climb. Not in a hurry, not even particularly aware. But, by the quiet consent of physics and time, you are moving through the Earth's most ancient filing system, toward the surface. Eventually. Probably. But there's no rush. Not here. There is no flash, no sudden breakthrough, no dramatic parting of rock and silt. But there is a feeling. A softness maybe, a loosening of the grip. The walls that surround you seem less committed, the sediment less possessive, the minerals less clingy. It's as though the earth itself has begun to sigh, just faintly, and let go. You're still surrounded, of course, still suspended in a maze of pores and fractures, but the composition has changed. The material here is finer, more porous, more willing to let you pass without the thousand-year arguments common in deeper strata. The pressure, while still immense, feels slightly more negotiable, and something in the ambient chemistry has shifted, subtle, but distinct. You're inching your way into a zone that might eventually be called habitable. Not for you, you've always been fine. But for things with opinions and metabolisms. You pass a microbe, it doesn't greet you, it may not even notice you, but its mere presence suggests something new, life, active, wriggling, doing things on purpose life. Not many, mind you, just a handful, a sparse collection of specialists, quietly chewing on rock, doing chemistry in the dark. Still, it's a crowd, by your standards. It's enough to suggest that this is not the bottom anymore. You are in the transition zone now. A place where buried becomes buriedless, where stillness becomes drift, and where water molecules like yourself begin to consider, vaguely, that perhaps the world above is not entirely hypothetical. Not that you're in a rush to get there. If anything, you're ambivalent. After so long in silence, the idea of turbulence, sunlight, and all those loud, splashy molecules churning in the upper zones, feels almost brash. They evaporate. They condense. They form weather. They attend storms, exhausting. And yet, you are rising. The sediment above is thinning, the mineral maze is opening. Pore by pore, decade by decade, you're being offered a path, not straight, not even particularly clear, but upward. Maybe in a few centuries, you'll reach the bottom of the ocean proper, The watery part. The bit with movement and light and creatures who swim instead of sitting still for millennia. Maybe. For now, it's just a theory. But you're drifting in the right direction. Slowly. Softly. And still entirely at peace. At first, it's hard to notice. After all, you've been surrounded by stillness so complete it could be bottled and sold as the premium grade. But somewhere in the fine fabric of your confinement, there's a change. The water around you is moving. Not much, less flow and more slow suggestion. But enough that it's not entirely your own doing. Something is carrying you along gently in one particular direction. It's the first current you've felt in a very long time. You've left behind the tight-lipped clay and the compressed carbonates. Now you are drifting through looser sands, gravels, and porous rock. The sediment here feels airy by comparison, like stepping out of a crowded elevator into an almost empty lobby. You have room. You can stretch out. Figuratively, of course. The current nudges you, then lets you be. It's not urgent, it's not demanding, it's more like a polite invitation. This way, if you please. You could resist if you wanted to, but why bother? Movement is rare enough down here. It's worth indulging. Tiny traces of oxygen thread through the water now, the faintest chemical whisper that somewhere above, life is happening. The microbes you pass are busier here, more animated, fussing with their biochemistry like over-caffeinated clerks. They don't acknowledge you, but they don't have to. You can feel their activity in the faint warmth and occasional chemical oddities drifting by. The darkness is still complete, but it no longer feels infinite. Somewhere far, far above, light exists. Not here, not yet, but the idea of it has become slightly more believable. The pressure is easing, imperceptibly but definitely. Every meter upward takes just enough weight off to make you aware of what you've been carrying all this time. And so, without any great announcement or fanfare, you move. Along the current, through the loosened layers, toward somewhere new. Not quickly. Not directly. But steadily. There's a moment, if you could call several decades a moment, when the last grains of sediment slip away, and the ceiling above is no longer made of rock. Instead, it's water. Thick, still, heavy water, but water nonetheless. You have crossed an unmarked border. Below you is the mineral world. Compressed, structured, slow. Above you is the ocean's basement level. A place where liquid reigns, yet still keeps its voice low. Here, the ground is gone, but you're not yet in the lively, bustling ocean most people imagine. This is the sub-seafloor aquifer, a world of fine dark stillness, where water moves like a whispered conversation. Channels snake through mud and sand, weaving in ways that would baffle even the most determined cartographer. You drift along one of them now, guided not by choice, but by the quiet pull of the current. The pressure is still immense, an unspoken weight that makes you compact, orderly, and unflappable, but it's less oppressive than it was in the rock. Here the molecules around you are less rigid, more inclined to slide past each other in slow choreography. Every so often a grain of sand drifts by, stirred loose from its resting place. You greet it silently, the way neighbors nod without breaking stride. Then it's gone, swallowed into the darkness. There is life here, but it's sparse, tiny, almost ceremonial in its slowness. Worms that never see light, bacteria that treat sulfur like fine dining. None of them are in a hurry. The pace is set not by tides or storms, but by the deep, patient rhythm of geology and gravity. The current strengthens, almost imperceptibly. Somewhere ahead, there must be a crack, a vent, an opening into a slightly larger channel. The pull is steady now, persistent, though never rushed. It feels as if the ocean itself is quietly calling you upward, the way a parent might call a child in from the garden, without raising their voice. You move, not because you must, but because the path is open. And in the deep ocean, that's reason enough. The current doesn't so much rush you forward as it simply refuses to let you stop. It threads you through narrowing gaps, eases you past silt that drifts like slow smoke, and then, without ceremony, you are no longer in the seafloor at all. You are in the ocean. Not the loud sunlit surface part, mind you, this is still the deep zone. A vast, cold, utterly dark expanse that stretches in all directions, with nothing to break the silence except the occasional passing creature, each one moving as if it has been given all the time in the world to get wherever it's going. The water here is open, but it is not empty. Tiny specks drift by, organic scraps, microscopic life, the fine dust of a planet constantly rearranging itself. Some are leftovers from far above, drifting down in what the biologists like to call marine snow. Others are locals, content to live out their days in the eternal night. You feel space around you now. You could, if you wanted, drift in any direction, but the current that brought you here still has its hand on your shoulder, guiding you gently upward. As you rise, the pressure lifts fraction by fraction. The water grows, if not warmer, then at least less unwelcoming. Faint vibrations travel through it, hints of distant movements far overhead. Somewhere, far above, sunlight exists. You still can't see it, you may not for a long time. But the ocean is no longer infinite darkness, it has layers, and you are moving between them. You pass a jelly-like creature that pulses slowly, its body glowing faintly in patterns that make no sense but are somehow mesmerizing. It doesn't acknowledge you. Why would it? You are, after all, just one water molecule among an uncountable number. But still, you share the same space for a few seconds before drifting apart, two travelers crossing paths in the middle of nowhere. The current begins to widen, losing its focus. Soon, you'll be free-floating entirely, part of the restless, shifting sea once more. You have returned. Not to where you began. Oceans never return you to the same place, but to the same vast, unending cycle. Here you might linger for years in the deep, or be swept toward the surface in weeks. You might join a storm cloud, freeze into sea ice, or sink back down again. It doesn't matter. There is no end, only the next part of the journey. And for now, in the slow, dark peace of the open ocean, that is more than enough. And so, in the quiet dark of the ocean's depths, you drift. There is no schedule here, no clock, no urgent business that might pull you away. Only the slow pull of currents, the soft touch of water against water, the occasional passing of something alive, most of which has no interest in you at all. You have been deep in the seafloor, you have brushed past minerals older than mountains, you have slipped through darkness so complete it seemed like the beginning of time. Now you're part of the open ocean once more, surrounded by billions like you, all moving without hurry, without worry, without end. Perhaps in a year you will rise into the sunlight. Perhaps tomorrow you will sink again to the quiet floor. Perhaps in 1,000 years you will become part of a raindrop falling on a faraway shore. But for now there is nothing to do but drift. Let the currents hold you, let the darkness wrap around you, let the stillness become your whole world. The journey continues, but you do not need to follow it tonight. For now, you can simply rest, quiet, unhurried, weightless, and sleep.